Jacob had always been told that he wasn't cut out for academics, but he never imagined it would come from his own teacher. As he sat quietly in class, the words of Miss Whitmore echoed in his ears. His mind raced as she critiqued his work in front of the entire class, highlighting every flaw and mistake. She mocked his efforts, telling him that he was better suited for feeding pigs and plowing dirt, all while the other students watched in stunned silence. Jacob tried to keep his composure, feeling his face burn with embarrassment, but it was clear to him now that no matter how hard he tried, he would never be good enough in her eyes. The humiliation cut deeper than he ever expected. He wanted to say something, to stand up for himself, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he left the classroom quietly, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. As he walked down the hallway, the weight of her cruel words followed him like a shadow. He had never felt so small, so invisible. His classmates' eyes were full of judgment, and he could hear the whispers behind his back. He wondered if they thought the same thing as Miss Whitmore, that he wasn't worth anything beyond his background. He felt like his worth had been reduced to nothing more than his inability to perform well in school. But deep down, Jacob knew he was more than that. He just didn't know how to prove it. He didn't want to be a disappointment anymore, but the pain from her words was overwhelming. The sound of a helicopter's low hum broke through the oppressive silence of the school grounds. Jacob's heart skipped a beat as he looked toward the football field. Students began to gather around, their curiosity piqued by the arrival of an unexpected guest. A sleek black helicopter touched down in the middle of the field, the rotors slowing to a stop. Jacob stood frozen for a moment, not sure what to expect. As the door opened, a tall, commanding figure stepped out. Jacob's stomach flipped. It was his grandfather, James Miller. Jacob's family had always been a mystery to most of his classmates. He came from a long line of farmers, but what they didn't know was that his grandfather was a wealthy and influential man, known for his sustainable farming empire. Jacob's mind raced. Why was he here? His grandfather didn't come to school events, never visited the farm. Yet here he was, standing in front of his school, his tailored suit gleaming in the sunlight. Jacob felt a strange mix of pride and unease. He didn't want his family's wealth to overshadow who he was. But at this moment, his grandfather's presence was undeniable. He didn't know if this would help or make things worse. James Miller's presence seemed to freeze the entire school. The students who had been laughing and whispering moments ago were now silent, eyes glued to him as he walked across the field with purpose. Jacob followed behind, his heart pounding. He hated the attention, but there was nothing he could do. His grandfather, a towering figure of success, was here for a reason. Jacob wished he could disappear, but as they reached the entrance, James turned to him with a reassuring smile. "Don't worry," he said. "We're going to fix this." Jacob barely had time to process what his grandfather meant before James made his way toward the school building. Jacob's heart was racing as he walked with his grandfather into the school. The atmosphere felt charged, like something was about to change. James Miller's footsteps were firm and decisive as he entered the school, heading straight for Miss Whitmore's classroom. Jacob hung back, not sure what was about to unfold. James's voice was calm but authoritative as he spoke to Miss Whitmore. "I understand there was an issue with my grandson in your class," he said, his tone cutting through the air like a blade. Miss Whitmore's face paled at the sight of James. She had no idea what to say. She had been teaching at the school for years, and here was a man whose donations had funded the entire science lab and the history program. His wealth and influence were undeniable. But now, he was here to confront her about her treatment of Jacob. James's words were pointed, but not without purpose. He asked Miss Whitmore why she felt the need to humiliate Jacob, simply because he struggled in school. "Not everyone is meant to excel in the same way," he said. "Jacob works hard every day. And just because his skills aren't in the classroom doesn't mean he doesn't have value." Miss Whitmore, caught off guard and clearly uncomfortable, struggled to find a response. James Miller's words hit their mark. He went on to explain how his family's financial contributions had helped shape the very foundation of the school. From funding the science labs to supporting extracurricular programs, his family had invested in the future of every student at the school. Yet Miss Whitmore had overlooked this. She had judged Jacob based on her narrow view of success. Her defenses began to crumble as she realized the magnitude of her mistake. The quiet power that James wielded was something she couldn't ignore, and for the first time, she felt vulnerable. Jacob stood silently, watching the confrontation unfold before him. His heart pounded in his chest, but it wasn't from fear anymore. As his grandfather's words sank in, Jacob found his voice. He stepped forward, his tone steady and unwavering. "I don't want special treatment," he said, looking Miss Whitmore squarely in the eyes. "I just want to be treated with respect. I've never asked for handouts. I just want to be seen for who I am, not just for my background or my grades." His words echoed in the quiet room, and for the first time, Miss Whitmore was speechless. Jacob had found the courage to speak up, not for himself, but for all the students who were overlooked because they didn't fit into a certain mold. Miss Whitmore mumbled an apology, but it felt empty. Jacob didn't expect her to suddenly change, but he knew this moment was important. She had been caught off guard, and the power dynamic between them had shifted. As he stood there, Jacob felt the eyes of his classmates on him, their support palpable. The apology might not have meant much to Miss Whitmore, but it meant everything to Jacob. For once, he had stood up for himself, and that was all that mattered. The room erupted into applause as Jacob's classmates cheered him on. The students who had once laughed at him, who had mocked his struggles, now saw him differently. He wasn't just the awkward kid who couldn't keep up in class. He was a person with dignity, with self-respect, and that made him powerful. As Jacob walked through the school halls the next day, his head held high. He knew that he had earned the respect of those around him. His classmates no longer saw him as the student who couldn't keep up. They saw him as someone who stood up for what was right. Jacob's journey was far from over, but he had proven something important that day. He had learned that respect wasn't something that could be bought or earned through power. It came from within, from the integrity with which one lived their life. As for Miss Whitmore, she couldn't help but reflect on the lessons she had learned. She had once thought herself untouchable, but Jacob's quiet strength had forced her to confront her own biases. She realized, for the first time, that true respect was earned through kindness, humility, and a willingness to see others as they were, not as she wanted them to be. Jacob's story became a turning point not just for him, but for everyone who witnessed it. The students, the teachers, and even Miss Whitmore had learned that dignity and respect are earned through hard work and integrity, not wealth, status, or academic prowess. Jacob walked with his head held high, no longer burdened by the weight of his teacher's cruel words. He knew he had changed not just his own life, but the lives of those around him. He had shown them that true worth comes from within, and that standing up for yourself, even when it's hard, can lead to real change.